The gavel didn't bang. It fell with a sound like a guillotine blade, signaling the end of Sarah Miller's life as she knew it. A widowed mother of one, she sat at the defense table, clutching a tattered folder, her knuckles white against the mahogany. Across from her, the prosecution sat with the relaxed posture of men who had already won. Beside Sarah sat 12-year-old Leo, his suit hanging off his small frame, his eyes fixed on the ceiling. The gallery whispered, mocking the sight of a child playing lawyer in a high-stakes felony fraud trial. They thought it was a farce. They thought the game was already over. But as Leo stood up, adjusting his oversized tie, he didn't look like a boy. He looked like a storm front moving across an open field. He looked at the lead investigator, a man whose career was built on the ruins of people like Sarah, and he opened his mouth. 2 questions. That was all it took to dismantle the entire foundation of the state's case and expose a web of corruption that stretched all the way to the governor's office. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Sarah Miller was never meant to be a target. She was a quiet librarian in a small town called Oakhaven, a place where people left their front doors unlocked and the local government was treated like an extended family. Her life revolved around Leo, a boy whose aptitude for logic and history often intimidated his teachers. When her husband passed away, he left her a small plot of land on the edge of the state forest, a property that became the center of a massive corporate greed scheme. Suddenly, land developers backed by local officials began pressuring her to sell, but the numbers never made sense. She held firm, and within weeks, she was charged with a complex series of financial crimes she didn't even understand. The bank records were forged, the signatures were duplicated, and the public defender assigned to her case spent more time looking at his watch than at her evidence. Sarah was facing 20 years in prison. The system was designed to crush her, and it nearly succeeded. The trial was supposed to be a formality, a quick execution of justice for the wealthy elite who wanted her land. The lead prosecutor, David Sterling, was a man of sharp suits and even sharper ambition, famous for never losing a case. He treated Sarah like a nuisance, someone to be brushed aside so the machinery of profit could keep turning. As the trial began, the courtroom felt suffocating, filled with the scent of old paper and the cold, unfeeling weight of bureaucratic power. Leo watched from the back of the room for the first 3 days, his notebook filled with frantic scribbles. He tracked the movements of the witnesses, the inconsistencies in the bank statements, and the way the judge seemed to lean toward Sterling whenever a crucial objection was raised. He realized that this wasn't a search for truth, it was a choreographed play. The defense team was failing, and the judge had already made up his mind. On the 4th day, the defense attorney simply stopped showing up, claiming a sudden medical emergency. The judge looked at Sarah with a cold, detached pity. He told her she had no options left, that the trial would continue regardless of her lack of counsel. Sarah was ready to accept her fate, to tell her son to go to his aunt's house and forget about her. But Leo walked to the defense table and sat down. When the bailiff moved to remove him, the judge paused, perhaps amused by the absurdity of it. He told the boy he could stay, but he was not to speak unless he was acting as a pro-se representative. He didn't know that Leo had spent every night in the Oakhaven Public Library, studying the statutes the prosecution was using against his mother. He had found the cracks. He had found the deliberate omissions in the financial filings. He had found the signatures that didn't match the bank's own ledger records. He wasn't just a child. He was the only person in the room who had actually read the fine print. The prosecution called their key witness, an accountant named Marcus Thorne, who had supposedly uncovered the fraud. Thorne spoke with the rehearsed confidence of a man who had lied 1,000 times before. He laid out the evidence, pointing to the doctored documents as if they were holy scripture. The jury looked at Sarah with anger, believing the narrative of a greedy widow trying to cheat the system. Sterling smirked, closing his file. He asked the judge if the defense had any questions. The room felt heavy, the silence stretching thin until the small voice of a 12-year-old boy cut through the air. Leo stood up, his voice steady, carrying an authority that seemed impossible for his age. He looked at Thorne and asked his first question. He asked, if the documents were processed on the dates recorded, why were the specific stamp impressions dated 3 days before the bank had actually acquired the physical paper stock? Thorne blinked, his composure faltering. The courtroom fell into a state of absolute stillness. The judge leaned forward, his spectacles slipping down his nose. The question was a technical trap, one that only someone who had spent hours cross-referencing shipping manifests and printer logs would ever know to ask. Thorne stuttered, claiming he was just the accountant, but Leo didn't stop. He moved to his second question, a question that hit the heart of the conspiracy. He asked, if the signature on the authorization form belonged to Sarah, why does the ink analysis show a chemical composition that was not manufactured until 6 months after the form was supposedly signed? The courtroom erupted in chaos. The prosecutor jumped up, shouting an objection, but the damage was already done. The jury members were no longer looking at the defendant, they were looking at the witness, whose face had gone pale. The illusion of perfection had been shattered by a child with a notebook. In the aftermath of the questions, the trial didn't just end, it collapsed. The judge ordered a recess, and when they returned, the atmosphere had shifted from cold indifference to panic. Sterling tried to maintain control, but the judge, realizing that he was being implicated in a public record of perjury, ordered an immediate forensic audit of the evidence. Over the next few weeks, the truth poured out. It wasn't just Sarah, dozens of citizens had been robbed of their land through the same fraudulent scheme. The conspiracy went deeper than anyone dared to imagine, involving local law enforcement, the Land Development Board, and even the financial institutions that had facilitated the forgeries. The scandal became the biggest story in the state, and the little library in Oakhaven became a symbol of a forgotten truth. Sarah was cleared of all charges, and the people responsible were finally brought to justice. It remains a haunting reminder of how fragile the veneer of authority really is. We are taught to trust the system, to believe that those in positions of power have done the math and checked the signatures. But this story serves as a stark warning. Sometimes, the most dangerous thing in a courtroom is not a high-priced lawyer, but a person who refuses to look away from the truth. The world moved on, the headlines changed, and the land was returned to its rightful owners, but the image of that boy in the oversized suit remains burned into the memory of everyone who was there that day. It asks a final, uncomfortable question to all of us. If a 12-year-old could tear down a mountain of corruption with nothing but 2 questions and a stubborn devotion to the truth, what is stopping us from doing the same in our own lives? Justice is not a gift given by the powerful, it is something that must be demanded, even when the odds are stacked against you.